He goes, I'm in Zion's camp. And he said, I'm sitting with a group of, 10, 12 people. And I was voted by them to, you speak to Joseph Smith. You walk with him day to day. Well, okay. So as the group now divides into smaller little units, okay, at this point you can imagine every unit leader, like a Brigham Young, is coming to Joseph and saying, what can we do to guarantee victory? In other words, do we keep our guns? Perfect. How many bullets do we need? Should we practice guerrilla warfare? What do we need to guarantee victory? And you get the most unusual response from a leader of a military unit. He says, I promise you victory if you keep the commandments, you daily pray, and you don't murmur. Okay, how can he guarantee victory? Keep commandments, daily pray, and don't murmur. Okay, which one's going to get him? Murmur. Okay, all right, so we all know that. We're all murmurers, and, that's actually going to get him. But, okay. So, along the way, Joseph tries to help. So, for example, Zion's camp was asked to keep the word of wisdom. Because, after all, they're Zion. They're wretched up. Where you'd say those back in Kirtland are not keeping it. But, all right, at one point, Joseph will go to a tent. He could smell some coffee brewing. And he will go tell the man he's a wonderful man. But you're not Zion. Go back to Kirtland. At one point, a woman who had come along to be a laundress, boy, you have to hand it to her. She's going to wash out the socks and the shirts, as they come to the rivers. And while she's out there washing out the socks and shirts, she heard cussing. And suddenly Joseph says, you're wonderful. Go back to Kirtland. Only Zion can redeem Zion. In other words, this is Zion's camp. Zion redeems Zion. Well, okay. So I'm going to take you through a typical day, and then we're going to see, did murmuring really do it? Okay. Typical day started at 5 o'clock in the morning. Tell me, where would you be? Okay, so 5 o'clock, they're up. And it's a bugle, that will wake them up. And then they are told, fix your breakfast. And a typical breakfast consisted of cornmeal and salt bacon. And, okay, they were then told you eat, kind of like cornbread, you eat the cornmeal, but the bacon, you chew it, but you don't swallow it. And so it becomes like gum, and you only swallow it once it's all white. And so as you walk along, because it's like gum, you'll continue to have saliva in your mouth, but once you swallow it, you'll be thirsty, and you'll actually slow up the camp because you have to get water at a local stream to keep going. So they would wake up at 5, cornmeal, salt bacon, walk along until 5 at night, and guess what they're eating at night for dinner? Cornmeal, salt bacon, and then they prepare for the next day and go to bed. Okay, what's the thing okay, does everyone attend to their prayers? No. Does everyone keep the commandments? No. Joseph will stop the camp, and he will say several times, pray. He will say several times, keep the commandments. Several times he will say, stop murmuring. And then he will say, if you don't stop, a plague will come upon the camp. Okay, what's a plague? You don't want a plague. It's worse than an epidemic. Plagues, you die. There's a black plague over in Europe. Okay, you don't want plagues. So he's saying to him all along the way, keep the commandments, pray, and don't murmur. Well, okay. In the meantime, Zion's camp gets very close to Jackson County. In fact, they are within 1 day of Jackson County. And remember this Missouri River, it had the Big Blue tributary, but it had another one called Fishing River. And so Zion's camp has arrived at Fishing River. They are 207 strong. And suddenly, to their surprise, here come county fathers from Jackson County, and they're carrying a white flag. What does a white flag mean? Truce. Come on, let's negotiate. Let's avoid bloodshed. So here they come with a white flag, and they are now taken to Squire Cook. Who is Squire Cook? Joseph, who now says he's Joseph the prophet. And they now say, okay, hey, let's work something out. We've now heard a whole bunch. We've now heard you have how many men? 10,000 men. How many Indians can you arm? 14,000. We now know angels overhead, pillars of fire. Okay, wow, we are willing to work something out. They then say, I tell you what, let's do. What we're willing to do is, if you want Jackson County that much, you just buy us out at the going rate and you can have the whole county. Could we do it today? You know, who's to say? Could we do it back then? No, because remember the people we were talking about in Kirtland, they wanted to build the temple out of logs. And you'd say, who's coming into the church? The poor have come into the church. And more than that, for every piece of one property we owned, they owned 4 pieces of property. And there's, you know, so they said, basically, no hard feelings. You buy us out, and we're willing to move out of this trailhead. Joseph says no, and then it's like they're pulling out another negotiation trick. So the next trick goes like this. They then say, well, I tell you what, we'll buy you out. And we'll buy you out as if your homes are still standing, as if your fences are still there, as if your gardens are in the ground, as if your barns are still there, and all you have to do is sign that no Latter-day Saint will ever again come and live in Jackson County. What's wrong with that?
We have to go live there.
Okay, we're going to go back, aren't we? Jackson County is a center place. It's New Jerusalem. It's, you know, it's a center place. We're going to build the 24 interconnected temples. Christ will come to rule and reign. 10 tribes coming from the north. In other words, why can't Joseph say, okay, great, you buy us out, give us all the cash as if our houses, our curtains were in the window, you pay this, and Joseph says no. How do the county fathers feel? They're angry. So angry they now say, hey, we see what you got. What do you have? A couple 100 men, they look starving. You know, just walked 800 miles or moving fast. You know, you want a diet plan? Try cornmeal and salt bacon. Oh, I don't know, give it a week. Boy, those 20 pounds are just going to drop. Okay, so they are very angry. They now say, what do you got? A couple 100 men? They now say, we don't see any angels. You know, we don't think you have big guns back there. They say, you know what we're going to do? We're going to go back home. Not only are we going to raise up the entire Jackson County militia, we're going to get our cousins in what county? Clay County. We're not only going to come destroy you, we're going to destroy all those people in Clay County who've been acting the part of the slaves, who are the Jackson exiles who, you know, are working in the fields. In other words, you think you're in trouble before you started the march. You just wait. Disaster is going to hit you everywhere you look. Okay. Meantime, Jackson County fathers now get in a little boat that they've come in this fishing river tributary, and that night there's a huge storm. And the storm is so big that in their boat there were 12 of them, but by the time they get back to where they've come from, 7 of them have drowned. And Joseph's comment is, the destroying angel has begun his work. In other words, come on, 200 men, we are going to go take Jackson County. So the next morning, Joseph has just received word, huge storm last night, 7 of these county fathers are dead. Joseph now goes to his camp. He tells the camp, you know, rise up, it's 5 in the morning, here's your bugler, he's going, only to discover that 64 are ill and can hardly move, and they have a disease called cholera. today we can get, diphtheria, cholera shots. You don't want cholera. Have you ever had anything like cholera? Okay, what happens if you have cholera? Actually, you can be dead in a few hours. But have you ever had, like, parasites? Okay, well, as a victim of parasites, whatever you put in comes out. And, wow, you want to get sick? Oh, wow, it's just no words to describe it. It's your instant diet. Okay, so Joseph now is awakened. It's the next morning. He goes to wake up his camp. 64 of them have cholera. It's the plague at the camp. Joseph now concludes he's going to bless his men, and he's going to rebuke that disease. In other words, he has priesthood, he has power, he can perform such miracles. However, he puts his hand on the head of the person with cholera, and suddenly Joseph's sick. And he takes his hands off his head, Joseph's fine. He goes to bless the next man. He puts his hands on his head. You ever thought about giving a blessing and suddenly you got the very illness of the person? Suddenly he's got the illness, and again, and finally he concludes, I'm going to go off and pray by myself. What's up? We're within a day of taking Jackson County. He prays to ask the Lord, what is wrong? And the Lord's response is, this group of men are not living the laws of Zion. Only Zion can redeem Zion. Zion will not be redeemed but for a short season. Tell me, does Zion's camp ever go in and attack Jackson County? No. Does Zion's camp succeed in getting Jackson County back for Latter-day Saints who are up in Clay County? No. In fact, Joseph now says to the camp, we're done. And to literally break up and go 2 by 2 back to Kirtland, or if you're a new convert and your family's just joined from Michigan and they haven't made it to Kirtland there, go check and then go back. How do the men feel in Zion's camp? Okay, some upset. Would you agree? Okay, what good comes out of Zion's camp? Church leadership. Okay, so you remember those 3 witnesses to the Book of Mormon, when they are asked to select the quorum of the 12, who are they selecting them from? Faithful in Zion's camp. When you get the first quorum of 70, where are they being selected from? Those in Zion's camp who did what? Pray. Okay. Keep the commandments. Don't murmur. Okay, now, we just have enough time. Okay. Suddenly, Zion's camp, 207 men almost are going home, but Joseph concludes, I'm going to go over and see my friends in Clay County. He goes over to see his friends in Clay County. You remember the Jackson exiles? And as he goes to see them, they're pretty excited to see him. And I say, Joseph, wow, you're here. You brought 10,000 men. You got, you can arm 14,000 Indians. You have angels. In other words, they have bought into all this kind of media press, and they're all pretty excited. Well, when Joseph says no, and I've actually sent home, the 200 plus men, and suddenly these people are saying, hey, Joseph, well, why don't you raise a second Zion's camp among us? In other words, we're the people that had actually got like a prophet recommend to go to independence. We're the people who were living Zion. How about if we raise a second Zion's camp? And more than that, there's over 200 of us. And we've been working in the fields. We're strong. We haven't marched 800 miles. We're eating good now. And Joseph actually thinks, good idea. And he prays to the Lord to ask, well, let me raise a second Zion's camp. And I'm going to raise it from the exiles up in Clay County who used to live in Jackson. So he prays to the Lord, and the answer is no. And the reason is, they did not continue as they commenced. Okay, what didn't they do? They built their houses. They built their barns. They had their lands of inheritance. They were taking things into the bishop's storehouse. Okay, what didn't they do?
They didn't build a temple.
They didn't build a temple. So you'd say, where was the first temple site dedicated? Independence. And you'd say, they didn't continue as they commenced. They didn't put in a foundation. They didn't do anything. So, okay. At some point, the church would go back to Jackson County, and there, you know, the center pole in the ground. When you get back there, what's the first thing you'd now do? Okay, I'm going to say, live in a tent. You guys like living in tents. Word campouts are big. You like tents, and I'm going to live in a tent, build a temple. And you're going to go, oh no, wait a minute, we need this, this. I'm going to go, oh wow. First thing, you go back, you build the temple, and then when you say, oh, I need a school teacher, send for me. Okay. All right, in closing, a story of my personal life. You realize, okay, as I grew up, grandmother in the home, and she would occasionally say to me, oh, Susan, you're going to be called back to Jackson County. I'd feel like, really? And she'd say, yes, you just need to prepare yourself. So, okay. All right, I'm now younger, but mind you, I look the same. And I'm now a student at BYU. And I had just moved into a new place that I could rent for $37.50 a month. Good old days, you guys all messed up, but I'm there. And, okay, we've got a new bishop, new ward. And it was a time when you had church in the morning and church at night. And so we went to Sunday school, and I'm all excited. We get to Sunday school, and suddenly our new bishop, we hadn't met him before, stands up and he says, we are not going to have Sunday school today. He said, I just got off the phone with a prophet of God, and he said, it's time to go back to Jackson County. They're calling people all over the church to go. And he said, I've been asked, can I send a few students from my ward? And he said, I don't know you. And so he said, what I'm going to do, he said, I'm going to pray about it, and you pray about it. And when you come back at night, let's have a testimony meeting. And if you think you're to be one of those ones, call back to Jackson, then you stand and bear your testimony. Well, okay, Grandma's dead by this point. I now run back from, a big kind of auditorium, kind of like over here, maybe the David O. McKay thing is not quite big enough, but, auditorium. I now rush home, and I'm calling on the phone. It costs a lot to call long distance in, and I'm saying, hey, I'm leaving school. Grandma's right, I'm going to Jackson. And my dad's saying, I don't think you know which end of the hammer to hold. He goes, you're not going to choose you. And I'm trying to knock at the manager. I want all my money back. I'm, writing to old boyfriends saying, yes, write me letters now at Independence, Missouri, general delivery. I'm going. Well, okay.